Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And during the month of July 2023, I'm talking exclusively about Criterion releases. I've done some on classic films in the collection that I have not talked about before, but also some of the recent releases that I picked up during the sale, which includes The Servant, directed by Joseph Losey, a 1963 movie starring Dirk, Bogarde, James Fox, Wendy Craig, and Sarah Miles, from a screenplay by Harold Pinter and adopted from a novel by Robin Maugham, who was the nephew of Somerset Maugham. So Criterion has released this as a Blu-ray. Now I know in the Region B there is a 4K UHD of The Servant, and it was kind of odd that Criterion decided not to release this film in 4K UHD, but I was not disappointed at all with the final presentation of this Blu-ray because it looked absolutely fantastic to me. One of the best black and white Blu-rays I think I've ever seen. And it does come with some really good supplements. So this is, I think, a really top drawer release from Criterion, despite the fact that it's not in 4K. Now, I do want to mention before I get started with my comments on the film that there's a great YouTube channel, Solitary Ronin, who is doing a whole, he's just about wrapping, he has a couple films left to go, survey of Joseph Losey films in chronological order. It's a great resource if you want to delve deeper into Losey's filmography. Yeah. It's a great way to look at movie directors, and to see them, how they develop through their career. So I'll provide a link to Solitary Ronin's video on The Servant in the description box below. Now this is a story. It's really a very simple story. It's about a indolent, wealthy young man of rank who has bought a house in London. It's that he's refurbishing. He lives alone, and he feels a need for a manservant. So he puts an ad in the paper, and a prospective employee arrives. This would be Dirk Bogarde. He plays a character called Barrett, a young indolent man played by James Fox. This is Tony. So this is the Barrett and Tony story in many ways. So when Barrett arrives at the flat, the door is open. He walks to the back. It's an empty flat at this moment in time. And there is Tony laying recumbent asleep on a lounge chair. And Barrett quickly sizes up this who this indolent young man's weaknesses might be. And you see it in his eyes right away. And Tony definitely needs someone to take care of him. Take care of him because he doesn't have a clue what to do. He has no job, but he has this kind of strange idea that he's going to go to Brazil and build new cities. But Tony does have a fiance, and this is Susan, played by Wendy Craig. Just as Barrett sizes up Tony right away, Susan sizes up Barrett, and she recognizes him as an evil presence in the house and a bad influence on her fiance. And then Barrett introduces another female into the mix. This is his so-called sister Vera, and she is played by Sarah Miles. So this is about the dissolution of Tony through the influence of Barrett. This is the story that we're watching. And it's based on a Robin Maugham novel that he wrote right after the war. So his novel's situated right after the war. Both Barrett and Tony in the novel are back from the war. And Harold Pinter in his screenplay updates it to the present day, which would be 1962-63 in London. So lots of things have changed in the meantime, especially the fact that There was a man, a rich young man having a manservant in the late 40s would have been somewhat not unusual. By the 60s, it was. It was a very unusual occurrence. So, the other change that Pinter makes with the Malm novel, which is a first-person narrative. So the novel is narrated by Tony's friends. We hear all these different episodes that occur in Tony's dissolution secondhand. So Pinter got rid of that. So he puts us right into the house. And this is a great set. Richard McDonald did the production design. It's the first time, I believe, that it might have been the first time McDonald did a production design, but he would go on to design many of Losey's films going forward. There's great cinematography by Douglas Slocum. But the set is just, it's amazing because there's a spiral staircase and there's so much activity that goes on up and down this staircase. So both Slocum and McDonald provide Losey with probably one of his biggest strengths, and this is his mise-en-scène. Now you can study, in film courses, they tell you what mise-en-scène, there's definitions roaming around, but until you see it, it's one of those things you got to really see it before you can really grasp what it is. And Losey was probably an absolute master of mise-en-scène. He is one of the definitions of mise-en-scène. And he came to England from Hollywood. I think he made 5 films in the U.S. He got blacklisted, had to come to England. He directed many films before The Servant. I think this is his 15th film, so maybe nine other films. They were B movies. They were low budget. They were sort of under the radar. But the funny part of it was everybody that worked with Losey thought he was a brilliant director. And they all wanted to keep working with him. Stanley Baker, I think, made 5 films with Losey, and Dirk Bogarde probably as many. But also technical people, and the critics didn't usually notice, especially in the U.S. and England, the English-speaking world, but the French noticed it right away, that this Losey was a step or 2 or 3 above an average director making low-budget B movies. As part of the mise-en-scène, he uses all the props, the paintings on the wall. The paintings on the wall actually were Robin Malm's family paintings that they put on the wall here. All kinds of props, dripping faucets, and the seduction scene is just great here, where Sarah Miles and James Fox in this kitchen seduction scene. In the supplements, there's an interview with Sarah Miles. She said the scene she's most often asked about is how erotic the scene was in the kitchen, which involved no nudity whatsoever. They both had their clothes on, and yet the tension is just amazing. There's also another famous scene, sex scene, where you don't really see much of anything except legs. And Losey, I think in David Thompson's biographical dictionary film, he identifies Losey's strength as a mix of both hysteria and subtlety. I think that's very true. Some of his films might get a little bit off into hysteria, but for the most part, the subtlety kind of reins it in. So we have terrific performances, and with great characters with great psychological depth to them, interesting psychologies. Now, one of the drawbacks for Losey to become a very popular director would be the influence of Bertolt Brecht. Losey in the late 1940s was the director of the premiere of Galileo, which starred Charles Laughton. So Losey was very much a Brechtian. He was a Marxist, but he was also a Brechtian. And as part of the influence of Brecht is the fact that there's no characters in his movies to root for. This is to identify with. Oh, I hope this guy succeeds. This was the Brechtian distancing device so that we observe these characters. And this is really comes into play the most. Our observation is because we feel like we're in this house. This is a great set. And Losey explores it, and his camera work, it's just a brilliant, like I say, definition of mise en scène, and it keeps you coming back because his theatrical roots very much play into these long takes and the emotional intensity of many of the scenes. It can be seen as kind of a symbolic realist, and I think one of the great ideas in this movie that keep you coming back is the question of why does Barrett do it? Why does Barrett sizes up this nice young man and spot his weaknesses and sets out to basically destroy him? Why does he do it? There's power dynamics involved here, to be sure. So in the late 1940s, when Robert Malm, who was his father was some titled person of great celebrity in the government as well. But after the war, the new Labor government was going to be pro-working class, and the rich were worried. What's going to happen to us? You know, I mean, when we give all this power to the working class, what's the working class going to do to us? Barrett representing that working class. But by the 60s, there was a different element. There was a whole lot of change going on, and certainly the idea that someone always has to dominate someone else in all kind of relationships. So one of the centerpieces of The Servant is a scene in a restaurant where we overhear little snippets of comments or of conversations between two people, and including Harold Pinter. Harold Pinter is at one of the tables here. Pinter was an actor before he started writing plays, and we get little bits of snippets about how the power dynamics going on in each of these very amusing little, you can't even call them anecdotes, just, you know, a few sentences. You get the feeling of what it's all about. But the scene between Susan and Tony, who are sitting in this restaurant, this is a power struggle going on. Susan wants Barrett out. Barrett, he doesn't want Barrett, or Tony does not want Barrett out. So very much it plays into the last film that I talked about, Triangle of Sadness, when things seem to go topsy-turvy. Who's going to gain the power? It seems an inevitability. Now in the supplements here, in this really terrific release from Criterion, we get interviews between the 1990s, and I think one of them might be brand new for this release. But they're with Dirk Bogarde, they're with Sarah Miles, Wendy Craig, and James Fox. That's the recent one that goes on the longest, and he's very good. They're all good, but Fox is probably the best. This is the inside, and this is Vera and Sarah Miles in seductive mode. So we also get a audio. Part of an audio commentary that Joseph Losey made with Michael Semen, who interviewed Losey throughout on all his career, which he put into a book, which is basically Losey's autobiography. And the section on The Servant is really good. We also get a interview with Pinter. This is from the BFI, Michael Billington, I think his name is, who wrote a biography and a good friend of Harold Pinter. I could watch it, and this is an excerpt also that focuses in on The Servant. I could listen to Pinter talk forever. He's one of my favorite writers. And this is a milestone. Pretty much for many of the characters involved, this film is a milestone. For Losey, he was coming into the mainstream art film kind of thing where his talents were being recognized much more widespread than they used to be. For Harold Pinter, he had written a screenplay for The Caretaker, one of his own plays, But this is his first screenplay, and they would go on together to make two more movies, The Accident and The Go-Between. They worked for a long time on Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Lost Time, Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time, two different titles. And Losey thought this was Pinter's greatest screenplay, the best screenplay he had ever written, but they couldn't get the financing for it. And I think Pinter's screenplay actually is available in book form. So, and it was a milestone for Dirk Bogarde too, because he had been a romantic star. He calls himself in his interview the English Dorothy L'Amour. And he wanted to break free of that image, and he had made a couple films before this where he was trying to break free from that image, but the public didn't like it much. So, but this was a hit movie, so, and he got great notices. So this really launched like the second period in Dirk Bogarde's career, and of course James Fox, who he was. This was his first lead role. He had been in a couple of movies before this, but this was his first lead role. And then we also get about a 20-minute commentary from Imogen Sarah Smith, and she basically covers Losey's career. And I mean, it's just, if you've ever heard Imogen Sarah Smith, I mean, everything she talks about is so compelling. No commentary. Why? They've never hired her to do a commentary. She does commentaries because Force of Evil is coming out in a couple weeks from Kino. She does the commentary for that, and boy, it would have been great to have her do a full commentary. But even so, this is 20 minutes of of elite stuff. And we get the pesky fold out. I kind of like the artwork. It's it's not realistically drawn, the characters, but it certainly sets the mood. And here you see Barrett's sizing up of Tony and his foppish ways. There is a really good essay by Colm Toibin, the novelist who wrote Brooklyn and other popular novels, called A Cruel Servility. And then they do give us, I always love it when they give us some screenshots, and there's a whole sort of mosaic of different screenshots and from the film. And this down here by my index finger there, this is the first confrontation between Barrett and Tony, and Tony will often be in that kind of laying down position, and it's sort of a motif throughout the movie. Now the movie, it was stayed. Nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to distribute it. It was over a year by the time that they had a final cut before anybody would release it. They thought it was too bleak, too downbeat, which it is bleak. It is kind of downbeat, but it's a very exciting kind of bleakness. So then when it went into, there was a last-minute cancellation. There was a bunch of movies on the backlog, and somebody at Warner Brothers, I think, decided we'll put this in our Warner's theater, and it got fantastic reviews. It came to the U.S., it got great reviews in the U.S. Didn't do a tremendous amount of business, but it was one of Losey's most successful movies, and he was able to finally, after 11 years, I think, he was not allowed back into the country during his blacklist days. And finally, he was allowed back in by '63. The whole momentum of the blacklist had dissipated. So he was really feted when he came home, and I believe it was shown at the New York Film Festival, also to great acclaim. So that's The Servant. Next up will be One False Move. I'm filming this on Monday. Tomorrow is the final release day, a Criterion release day that will occur within the context of the sale. So I'm going to be there first thing tomorrow morning. Nothing to do. I'm going to be watching the movie, go through the supplements. Hopefully I will have a review up by Wednesday, Friday the 28th being the last day of the sale. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are always welcome. Take care.